The canyon walls trembled with the roar of rushing water, and Matthew Quinn heard the woman's scream cut through the sound like a blade through silk before he even saw her, trapped on a narrow ledge 20 feet below the rim where the flash flood had cornered her like prey. He had been riding through the New Mexico territory that scorching June afternoon in 1883, following the dry riverbed that wound through the canyon system near Hachita, when the sky had suddenly darkened with clouds so black they looked bruised. The storm came fast, the way they always did in this unforgiving land, and within minutes the parched earth could not drink fast enough. Water rushed down from the high country, turning the peaceful canyon into a churning death trap. Matthew dismounted his bay mare and secured her reins to a twisted juniper, then crawled to the canyon's edge on his belly. Below, a young woman clung to an outcropping of rock, her dark hair plastered to her face, her gray traveling dress soaked through and weighing her down. The water surged around the base of the cliff, rising steadily, and he could see the terror in her eyes even from this distance. "Hold on," he shouted over the roar. "I am coming down." He did not wait for her response. There was no time for planning or second thoughts. Matthew grabbed his rope from his saddle, tested the juniper's roots with a hard yank, and fashioned a quick bowline around his waist. The descent would be treacherous, the wet rock slick as ice, but he had grown up in these canyons, had learned to climb before he could ride, and his hands knew what to do even when his mind wanted to calculate the 100 ways this could end badly. He went over the edge boots first, finding toeholds in the sandstone, his calloused palms gripping the rope as he rappelled down. Twice his feet slipped, and his heart hammered against his ribs. The woman watched him come, her knuckles white where she gripped the rock. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, and even through the rain and terror, he saw she was beautiful in a way that made something in his chest tighten. "What is your name?" he called out when he was 10 feet above her. Olivia Graham." Her voice shook but held steady beneath the fear. "Olivia, I am Matthew Quinn. When I reach you, you are going to hold onto me tight. Do you understand?" She nodded, and he saw her jaw set with determination. Not just a pretty face then, she had spine. The final few feet were the worst. The rock face was nearly vertical here, and water cascaded down in sheets, trying to pry him loose. But then his boots touched the ledge beside her, and he wrapped one arm around her waist while keeping his other hand on the rope. "Put your arms around my neck," he said, his face inches from hers. Up close, he saw that her eyes were the color of honey, flecked with gold, and they looked into his with a trust that stunned him. She did not know him from Adam, yet she was placing her life in his hands without question. Olivia's arms came around him, and she pressed against his chest. He felt her heart racing, or maybe it was his own. "Do not let go, no matter what happens," he told her. The climb back up was brutal. With her weight added to his, every handhold became a test of strength, every foothold a gamble. His shoulders screamed in protest, his fingers cramped, and the rope bit into his flesh even through his vest. Below them, the water continued to rise, licking at their feet like a hungry beast. Halfway up, Olivia's grip faltered. She slipped a few inches, crying out, and Matthew's arm tightened around her waist so hard he knew there would be bruises. "I have got you," he said through gritted teeth. "Trust me, I have got you." "I am sorry," she whispered against his neck. "I am so sorry. Nothing to be sorry for. Just hold on." The last 10 feet felt like miles. His muscles burned, his lungs fought for air, and black spots danced at the edges of his vision. But then his hand found the canyon rim, then his elbow, and with a final surge of strength that came from some reserve he did not know he possessed, he hauled them both over the edge and onto solid ground. They lay there in the mud and rain, gasping for breath. Matthew's entire body shook with exhaustion, but he kept his arm around Olivia, anchoring her to safety. She was crying now, silent tears mixing with the rain on her face, and he understood. Sometimes surviving was more overwhelming than the danger itself. "You are safe now," he said softly. "I promise you are safe." She turned her head to look at him, and in that moment, with the storm raging around them and mud in their hair and death still so close they could taste it, something passed between them. A recognition, perhaps. A connection forged in fire and water and fear. Matthew had saved plenty of lives in his 31 years, had pulled men from burning buildings and wrestled a spooked horse away from a child. But he had never felt anything like this sense that his entire life had been leading him to this canyon on this day to find this woman. "Thank you," Olivia whispered. "You saved my life." He helped her sit up, keeping a steadying hand on her back. "How did you end up down there?" "My horse spooked when the storm hit. She threw me and bolted, and I slid down the slope before I could catch myself. I thought I was going to die." She looked at the canyon edge, then back at him. "I know I was going to die, and then you appeared like something out of a dream." Matthew felt heat rise to his face despite the cold rain. "Just lucky timing. We need to get you somewhere warm and dry. Can you stand?" She nodded, and he helped her to her feet. She swayed, and he caught her around the waist again. This close, he noticed things he should not be noticing given the circumstances. The curve of her jaw, the fullness of her lips, the way she fit perfectly against his side. He cleared his throat and looked away, focusing on his horse instead. "My ranch is about 3 miles north. It is not much, but it is dry and there is a fire. You can rest there until the storm passes." "I could not impose," Olivia started, but he cut her off. "You are soaked to the bone and probably going into shock. This is not an imposition. This is survival." His tone came out harsher than he intended, born of concern rather than irritation, but she seemed to understand. She nodded and let him boost her onto his mare. He swung up behind her and gathered the reins, then urged the horse into a steady walk northward. Olivia leaned back against his chest, and he told himself it was only because she was exhausted and cold, nothing more. But when he wrapped his arm around her waist to steady her, and she placed her hand over his, something warm and bright bloomed in his chest that had nothing to do with body heat. The ride to his ranch took longer than usual because of the mud and rain, but eventually they crested a rise, and his homestead came into view. It was modest, just a 2-room cabin with a barn and a corral, but he had built it with his own hands 4 years ago when he decided to stop drifting and put down roots. The land was good here, with water in the creek most of the year and grass for cattle. He had been making a decent living, enough to think about expanding, maybe hiring a hand or two. He had never thought much about being lonely until this moment, seeing his empty cabin through Olivia's eyes and feeling suddenly aware of how solitary his life had become. They reached the barn first, and he dismounted, then helped Olivia down. She stumbled and he caught her, and for a heartbeat, they stood there in the barn doorway with his hands on her waist and her hands on his shoulders, looking at each other while the rain drummed on the roof. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but no words came. Instead, she lowered her gaze and stepped back, and Matthew felt the loss of her warmth like a physical thing. He tended to his horse quickly, then led Olivia through the rain to the cabin. Inside, everything was exactly as he had left it that morning. His coffee cup on the table, his bedroll on the floor near the fireplace, his few possessions arranged with the careful order of a man who lived alone. He suddenly wished he had more to offer her, something finer than rough-hewn furniture and a single change of clothes hanging from a peg on the wall. "Sit by the hearth," he told her, moving to build up the fire. I will get you something dry to wear." "I am getting mud all over your floor," Olivia said, her teeth chattering. "The floor has seen worse." He coaxed the embers to life and added kindling, then larger pieces of wood until flames crackled cheerfully. The warmth was immediate and welcome. He retrieved his spare shirt and a pair of trousers from the small bedroom, knowing they would be far too large for her but better than nothing. When he returned, Olivia was staring at the fire with a faraway expression. He knelt beside her and placed the clothes in her hands. "These will be more comfortable than that wet dress. You can change in the bedroom. I will stay out here." She looked at him with those honey-colored eyes, and he saw something shift in them, a softening. "You are a good man, Matthew Quinn." "Just a man," he said gruffly, standing. "Go on now before you catch pneumonia." When she emerged a few minutes later, she looked almost comical in his oversized clothes, the shirt tails hanging to her knees and the trouser legs rolled up multiple times. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders, still damp but no longer dripping, and Matthew found he could not look away. Without the mud and fear, she was even more striking, and the sight of her in his clothes did something strange to his equilibrium. "Better?" he asked. "Much." She moved closer to the fire, holding out her hands to the warmth. "I must look ridiculous. You look alive. That is what matters." She turned to face him fully, and her expression was serious. "You risked your life for me. You did not know me, did not owe me anything, but you climbed down into that canyon without hesitation." "Why?" Matthew considered the question. He could give her a simple answer, something about duty or common decency, but standing here in his cabin with the storm raging outside and this unexpected woman wearing his clothes, he found he wanted to be honest. "Because I heard you scream, and I knew if I did not try you would die. And I could not live with that. Most men would have at least thought about it first, calculated the risk. I am not most men." He met her gaze steadily. "And some things do not require thinking, they just require doing." Olivia moved closer to him, close enough that he could see the water droplets still clinging to her eyelashes. "I owe you my life. You do not owe me anything." "Then let me give you my gratitude at least. Let me stay and make you dinner as a thank you, unless you want me to leave." The last part came out uncertain, almost vulnerable, and Matthew realized she had nowhere else to go. Her horse was gone, her belongings lost, and Hachita was a 6-mile walk from here. "You are welcome to stay as long as you need," he said. "But you are a guest, not a servant. You do not need to cook." "I want to, please. I need to do something useful or I will think too much about what almost happened." He understood that. After his parents died in a wagon accident when he was 19, he had worked himself to exhaustion for weeks just to keep the memories at bay. Sometimes action was the only remedy for a troubled mind. "All right," he agreed. "I have beans and salt pork and some cornmeal, not fancy but filling." They worked together in comfortable near silence, Olivia moving around his small kitchen with surprising ease considering she had been here all of 10 minutes. She hummed while she cooked, a soft melody he did not recognize, and Matthew found himself watching her more than he was helping. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when it fell forward, the graceful movements of her hands as she stirred the pot, the small smile that curved her lips when she tasted the beans and added more salt. "Where were you headed when the storm hit?" he asked, sitting at the table while she worked. "Hachita. I was supposed to meet my cousin there 3 days ago, but the stage broke a wheel and we were delayed in Silver City. I decided to hire a horse and ride ahead rather than wait another week for the next stage." She glanced over her shoulder at him. "That turned out to be a poor decision. Your cousin will be worried. Margaret has probably given me up for dead by now. I should send her a telegram as soon as possible." Olivia ladled beans onto 2 tin plates and brought them to the table along with cornbread she had somehow managed to whip together from his meager supplies. "What about you? Do you have family in Hachita?" "No family anywhere. My parents died years ago. No siblings, no wife, no children." He heard how stark that sounded and added, "Just me and the ranch." Olivia sat down across from him and sympathy filled her eyes. "That must be lonely. It suits me." But even as he said it, Matthew wondered if it was still true. The cabin had never felt empty before tonight. Now, with Olivia sitting at his table, her presence warm and real, he was acutely aware of how quiet his life had been. How small. They ate in silence for a while, and the food was better than anything he had made for himself in months. When Olivia looked up and caught him staring, she smiled. "What is it? You are a good cook. My mother taught me. She always said a woman should know how to make a feast from nothing because you never know when hard times might come." Her smile faded a little. "She died last year. Fever took her in 3 days. I am sorry. Thank you." Olivia pushed her beans around her plate. "My father passed when I was 16. After Mother died, I had no reason to stay in Santa Fe anymore. Margaret wrote and invited me to come live with her in Hachita. She married a shopkeeper there and they have a spare room, so here I am, starting over. That takes courage, or desperation." But she said it with a hint of humor, and Matthew found himself smiling in return. They talked long into the evening, the conversation flowing easily despite the fact that they had been strangers only hours ago. She told him about growing up in Santa Fe, about her mother's flower garden and her father's bookshop, about the way the city had grown and changed over the years. He told her about building this ranch from nothing, about the hard winters and the summer droughts, about the satisfaction of watching his small herd of cattle grow. Outside, the storm gradually lessened, the thunder moving east, but neither of them suggested that Olivia should leave. When she yawned, trying to hide it behind her hand, Matthew stood and retrieved his bedroll. "You take the bedroom, I will sleep out here by the fire." "I cannot take your bed, you have already done so much. It is not negotiable." His tone was gentle but firm. "You have been through an ordeal. You need proper rest." Olivia looked like she wanted to argue, but another yawn caught her. "Thank you, Matthew, for everything. Sleep well, Olivia." He lay by the fire long after she disappeared into the bedroom, listening to the settling of the cabin and the distant rumble of retreating thunder. His body was exhausted, muscles sore from the climb, but his mind raced. He kept seeing Olivia's face as he descended that canyon wall, the trust in her eyes when she wrapped her arms around his neck, the way she felt pressed against him. He told himself it was just adrenaline, just the intensity of the situation, but deep down he knew it was something more. In the morning, sunlight streamed through the cabin windows, harsh and bright after yesterday's storm. Matthew woke to the smell of coffee and found Olivia already up, dressed in her own clothes which she had somehow managed to clean and dry overnight. She smiled when she saw him stirring. "Good morning. I hope you do not mind I made coffee." "Mind? You are a miracle." He sat up, running a hand through his hair, suddenly aware that he must look like hell. He needed a shave and probably smelled like horse and sweat, but Olivia did not seem to care. She brought him a cup of coffee, strong and hot, and he wrapped his hands around it gratefully. "I should head to Hachita today," she said, settling onto the bench by the window. "Margaret will be beside herself, but I have a problem. Your horse." "Yes. I have no transportation, and it is too far to walk in this heat." She looked at him hopefully. "I do not suppose you would be willing to give me a ride. I can pay you once I reach my cousin's house." Matthew shook his head. "I do not want your money. Of course I will take you. Let me tend to the animals and we will leave within the hour." The ride to Hachita passed too quickly. Olivia sat behind him on the mare again, her arms around his waist, and they talked about everything and nothing. She asked him questions about ranching, about the land, about his dreams for the future. He found himself telling her things he had never told anyone, about wanting to expand his herd, about maybe starting a horse breeding program, about the satisfaction he found in working with his hands and watching something grow from his efforts. In turn, she told him about her love of reading, how she had spent hours in her father's bookshop as a child, losing herself in stories of far-off places. She talked about wanting to open a school someday, about believing that education could change lives, especially for the children growing up in these rough frontier towns. When Hachita finally appeared on the horizon, a small cluster of buildings shimmering in the heat, Matthew felt an unexpected heaviness in his chest. This was goodbye, then. He would deliver Olivia to her cousin, and she would disappear into her new life, and he would ride back to his ranch alone. The thought bothered him more than it should have. Margaret's shop was easy to find, a tidy mercantile on the main street with living quarters above. The moment they dismounted, a woman burst through the door, her face a mask of relief and fury. "Olivia Graham, where have you been?" "I have been worried sick." Olivia rushed into her cousin's arms. "I am so sorry, Margaret. There was a storm and I got trapped, and if it were not for Matthew, I would have died." Margaret turned to look at him, her expression softening. She was older than Olivia by perhaps 10 years, with similar features but harder edges, as if life had worn away some of the gentleness. "You saved her life." "I was in the right place at the right time," Matthew said, uncomfortable with the gratitude shining in Margaret's eyes. "Come inside, both of you. You must tell me everything." Over tea in Margaret's comfortable parlor, Olivia recounted the story of the flood and the rescue. She made him sound braver than he felt he had been, and by the time she finished, Margaret was looking at him like he was some kind of hero. "We owe you a debt we can never repay, Mr. Quinn." "You do not owe me anything, madam. I am just glad I could help." But Margaret would not hear of him leaving without accepting some kind of payment. She loaded him down with supplies from the store, refusing to take no for an answer, and invited him to dinner the following Sunday. Matthew agreed, mostly because it meant he would see Olivia again, and he was not ready to say goodbye yet. Over the next few weeks, Sunday dinners at Margaret's became routine. Matthew told himself he was just being neighborly, just accepting an invitation from grateful folks, but the truth was simpler and more complicated than that. He was falling in love with Olivia Graham. It happened in small moments. The way she laughed at his stories, her whole face lighting up with joy. The way she asked his opinion on books she was reading, genuinely interested in his thoughts. The way she looked at him sometimes when she thought he was not paying attention, her expression soft and wondering. He courted her the only way he knew how, with honesty and steady presence. He brought her wildflowers from the canyon. He fixed broken things around Margaret's shop without being asked. He showed up every Sunday and sat across from her at dinner, talking about everything under the sun, learning the landscape of her mind the way he knew the landscape of his ranch. One evening in late August after dinner, Olivia asked if he would walk with her. They strolled through Hachita's quiet streets as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She was unusually quiet, and Matthew sensed she had something on her mind. "What is it?" he asked gently. Olivia stopped walking and turned to face him. They were at the edge of town now, with nothing around them but desert stretching to the horizon. "Do you believe in fate, Matthew?" "I do not know." "Why do you ask?" "Because I keep thinking about that day in the canyon. About how if the storm had come an hour earlier or later, we never would have met. About how if you had taken a different trail, I would have died there. about how sometimes it feels like the universe conspired to bring us together. She looked up at him, vulnerability written all over her face. "Does that sound foolish?" "No," his voice came out rough. "It does not sound foolish at all. I know we have not known each other long, only a couple of months, but I feel like I have known you my whole life, like I was waiting for you without even realizing it." She took a deep breath. "I am in love with you, Matthew Quinn, and I needed you to know that, even if you do not feel the same way." For a moment, Matthew could not speak. He had dreamed of hearing those words from her, but now that they were real, hanging in the air between them, he found himself overwhelmed. He reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his calloused thumbs brushing her cheeks. "I fell in love with you the moment I saw you on that ledge, looking up at me like I was your salvation. And every day since then, I have fallen deeper. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me, Olivia." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home. Her arms came around his neck the way they had in the canyon, but this time there was no fear, only joy. She tasted like the tea they had drunk at dinner, sweet and warm, and Matthew thought he could spend the rest of his life kissing her and never grow tired of it. They married in October, a simple ceremony in the small church in Hachita with Margaret and her husband as witnesses. Olivia wore a dress of pale blue that matched the autumn sky, and she carried wildflowers from the canyon where they had met. When Matthew slipped the ring on her finger, a simple gold band he had saved 3 months to buy, his hand shook slightly. She steadied it with her own and smiled up at him, and he knew he was the luckiest man in New Mexico territory. She moved to the ranch, and the cabin that had felt too small for one person somehow became the perfect size for two. Olivia transformed it with small touches: curtains in the windows, herbs growing in pots on the sill, books stacked on a shelf Matthew built for her. She made it feel like a home rather than just a place to sleep. The first winter was hard. The snow came early and stayed late, and there were days when they were snowed in, unable to leave the cabin. But Matthew found he did not mind. Those long, quiet days gave them time to learn each other, to talk and dream and plan. Olivia taught him to read better, working through books with him by firelight. He taught her to ride properly, to rope a calf, to read the weather in the clouds. They made love for the first time on a night when the wind howled outside and the fire crackled in the hearth. Matthew had been nervous, worried about hurting her or disappointing her, but Olivia had taken his face in her hands and kissed him slowly, deeply, until his fears melted away. Afterward, they lay tangled together under his quilt, and she traced the scars on his chest from years of hard living. "Every mark tells a story," she whispered. "Someday I want to know them all. Someday," he promised, "I will tell you everything." In the spring, they expanded the cabin, adding a second bedroom and a proper kitchen. Matthew hired 2 hands to help with the ranch work, 2 young brothers from Hachita who were eager to learn. With their help, the herd grew, and Matthew started his horse breeding program. Olivia began teaching in the evenings, gathering the ranch hands and the neighboring children, anyone who wanted to learn to read and write. She had a gift for it, Matthew saw. She made learning feel like an adventure rather than a chore. The years passed with the rhythm of the seasons. Summers working the cattle, autumns bringing in the harvest, winters hunkered down against the cold, springs full of new life. Through it all, Matthew and Olivia's love deepened and matured, becoming something solid and unshakable. When Olivia told him she was pregnant in the spring of 1885, Matthew felt his knees go weak. She laughed at his expression and pulled him down to sit beside her on the porch steps. "Are you happy?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. "Happy." He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. "Olivia, I am terrified and thrilled and so full of love I might burst from it. A baby. Our baby. Our baby, she repeated, and he heard the wonder in her voice. Their son was born in January of 1886, during a snowstorm that rivaled the one from their first winter. The doctor from Hachita could not make it through the drifts, so Matthew delivered the baby himself with Margaret's guidance. It was the most terrifying thing he had ever done, worse than facing down rustlers or breaking wild horses or climbing down that canyon wall to rescue Olivia. But when he heard his son's first cry, when he placed the tiny, wriggling bundle in Olivia's arms and saw the tears of joy on her face, he knew it was also the most profound. They named him Samuel, after Matthew's father. He had his mother's honey-colored eyes and his father's dark hair, and from the moment he came into the world, he changed everything. The ranch was louder now, filled with baby noises and laughter. Matthew found himself working harder than ever, driven by the need to provide for his family, to build something lasting that he could pass down to his son. Olivia thrived as a mother. She sang to Samuel while she cooked, taught him words before he could walk, filled his world with stories and love. Watching her with their son, Matthew sometimes felt overwhelmed by emotion. This woman, this incredible woman, had chosen him, had built a life with him, had given him a family when he thought he would spend his days alone. 2 years later, their daughter arrived, born on a hot July afternoon with considerably less drama than her brother. They named her Rose, and she had her father's green eyes and her mother's dark curls. Where Samuel was serious and thoughtful, Rose was all energy and mischief from the start. She kept them on their toes and filled the house with laughter. Margaret visited often, delighting in her role as aunt and bringing gifts from the store. The ranch hands stayed on, becoming part of their extended family, eating Sunday dinners with them and helping watch the children. The isolation Matthew had once valued became a thing of the past, and he found he did not miss it at all. On their 10th anniversary, Matthew took Olivia back to the canyon where they had met. They left the children with Margaret for the day and rode out together in the early morning light. The canyon looked different now, peaceful in the absence of storms, but Matthew felt his chest tighten as they approached the edge. "I dream about that day sometimes," Olivia said softly, standing beside him. "About the water rising, the fear, about looking up and seeing you coming down to me. I dream about it too, about what might have happened if I had been 5 minutes later, if I had taken a different trail." He pulled her close. "I dream about losing you and I wake up terrified. You will never lose me, Matthew Quinn, not in this life." She turned in his arms to face him. "Do you know what I think about when I look at this canyon now? Not the fear. I think about how this is where my life truly began, where I found you, where I found home." He kissed her then, standing on the rim of the canyon that had brought them together, and it felt like a renewal of their vows. A promise to continue choosing each other, day after day, year after year. They returned to the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky the same orange and pink it had been the night Olivia first told him she loved him. Samuel ran out to meet them, Rose toddling behind on unsteady legs, and Matthew lifted them both up, one in each arm, while Olivia laughed at his exaggerated groans about how big they were getting. That night, after the children were in bed, Matthew and Olivia sat on the porch watching the stars. He held her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm, and thought about the life they had built. The ranch was prospering beyond his wildest dreams. The house was full of love and laughter. His children were healthy and happy. And the woman beside him, the woman he had pulled from a flooded canyon 10 years ago, was still the center of his universe. "You remember what you asked me once," Olivia said, breaking the comfortable silence. "About whether I believed in fate. I remember. I have thought about that question a lot over the years, and I have decided that, yes, I do believe in fate, but not the kind that removes our choices. I believe in the kind that gives us opportunities. That day in the canyon, fate gave us an opportunity to meet. But we chose everything that came after. We chose to fall in love. We chose to build this life together, and I would choose it all again every single day. Matthew brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. So would I, every single day. As the years continued to unfold, the Quinn family became a fixture in the community. Matthew's ranch became one of the most successful in the territory, known for quality cattle and fine horses. Olivia's evening school grew into a proper one-room schoolhouse that Matthew built for her, and children came from miles around to learn from her. Samuel showed signs of inheriting his father's way with animals, while Rose demonstrated her mother's love of learning and teaching. When New Mexico achieved statehood in 1912, the Quinns celebrated with their now grown children and their families. Samuel had married a rancher's daughter from the next county, and they had given Matthew and Olivia 3 grandchildren. Rose had become a teacher like her mother and married a doctor who had come west from Boston. They had 2 children of their own and lived in Albuquerque, but visited the ranch often. Matthew was 60 years old now, his hair more gray than black, his body bearing the marks of decades of hard work. But when he looked at Olivia, he still saw the young woman clinging to that canyon ledge, still felt the same surge of protectiveness and love. She was 52, her hair threaded with silver, her face lined with laughter and sun, and she was more beautiful to him than ever. They still took walks in the evening, still sat on the porch holding hands, still talked for hours about everything and nothing. Their love had weathered every storm, had grown deeper with each passing year, had become the foundation upon which their entire world was built. One evening in late autumn, as they watched their grandchildren play in the yard, Olivia leaned her head on Matthew's shoulder. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if we had never met?" "Never. There is no version of my life worth imagining without you in it." "Not even a little curious, Olivia. Before I met you, I was just existing, going through the motions. You taught me what it means to truly live, to love, to build something that matters." He turned to look at her, cupping her face the way he had that first night she told him she loved him. "You are my whole world, you always have been." She smiled, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "And you are mine, my rescuer, my partner, my love." They kissed, gentle and sweet, while their grandchildren played and the sun set over the New Mexico landscape they both loved. It was not the passionate kiss of young lovers, but something deeper and more enduring. A kiss that spoke of decades of devotion, of weathering life's storms together, of building something beautiful from that single moment when a cowboy heard a woman scream and climbed down a canyon wall without hesitation. As darkness fell and the stars emerged one by one, Matthew and Olivia sat together in the home they had built, surrounded by the family they had created, and knew they had lived a love story worth every hardship, every sacrifice, every moment of fear and joy. They had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, and they had chosen to hold on tight and never let go. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Not the size of the ranch or the number of cattle or the success of the school. What mattered was this, that a cowboy had heard a woman scream, had risked everything to save her, and in doing so had found his reason for living. What mattered was that Olivia had looked up from that ledge and placed her trust in a stranger, and that stranger had become her everything. Their story became legend in Hatchita, told and retold over the years. The tale of the flood and the rescue, of the love that grew from danger, of the family that flourished against all odds. Young couples heard it and hoped for something similar. Old couples heard it and nodded, recognizing the truth of enduring love. But for Matthew and Olivia, it was never a story. It was simply their life, the life they had chosen together every single day. And when they eventually passed, many years later, they were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their headstones simple but bearing the dates that mattered. The day they met, the day they married, and the day they finally had to let go. But even death could not truly separate what they had built. Their children and grandchildren carried on the ranch and the school. Their great-grandchildren told stories about the legendary Matthew Quinn, who climbed down into a flooded canyon to save the woman who would become his wife. And anyone who visited the little cemetery on the hill could see, carved beneath both their names, the same simple phrase: "Forever chosen, forever loved." The canyon where they met still stood, unchanged by the passage of time. Floods came and went, storms raged and cleared, but the rocks remained, bearing silent witness to the moment when two lives collided and became one. And if you visited on a quiet evening when the sun painted the sky in orange and pink, you could almost imagine you heard the echoes of their story carried on the wind. A scream, a promise, a lifetime of love that began with one man's decision to climb down into danger rather than walk away. That was the real magic of their story, the part that resonated across generations. Not the dramatic rescue, though that certainly made for a thrilling tale. The real magic was in what came after. In the choice to keep showing up, keep choosing each other, keep building something beautiful even when life was hard. In the way a moment of crisis could become the foundation for a lifetime of love. Matthew and Olivia Quinn proved that sometimes the best love stories begin with the most unlikely circumstances. That sometimes fate does intervene, offering up opportunities disguised as disasters. That sometimes the person you need most in the world appears exactly when you need them, climbing down through danger to carry you to safety. And that sometimes, if you are very lucky, the person who saves your life becomes the person you want to spend that life with. Forever chosen, forever loved. Forever grateful for that one stormy day when everything changed, when a cowboy heard a scream and did not hesitate, when a woman looked up and saw her future climbing down to meet her. That was their legacy. Not just the ranch or the school or the family they created, but the proof that love, real love, endures. That it is worth fighting for, worth risking everything for, worth building a whole life around. That it can grow from the most unexpected beginnings into something solid and lasting and beautiful. And so the story of Matthew and Olivia Quinn lived on, long after they were gone, a testament to the power of love and courage in choosing each other, day after day after day, until the very end and beyond.